The Daily Bible in chronological order. Jesus questioned again. John chapter 19 verses 7 through 11. The Jews insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said, "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." Play on Pilate's loyalty. John chapter 19 verses 12 through 15. From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jews kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of Passover week, about the 6th hour. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, "Take him away! Take him away! Crucify him!" "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priest answered. Pilate washed his hands. Matthew chapter 27 verses 24 and 25. When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." All the people answered, "Let his blood be on us and on our children." Barabbas is released. Matthew chapter 27 verse 26, Mark chapter 15 verse 15, Luke chapter 23 verses 24 and 25, and John chapter 19 verse 16. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will. Jesus was led out. Matthew chapter 27 verse 31, Mark chapter 15 verse 20, and John chapter 19 verse 17. When they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. Carrying his own cross, he went out. Simon of Cyrene. Matthew chapter 27 verse 32, Mark chapter 15 verses 21 and 22, Luke chapter 23 verse 26. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Women weep for Jesus. Luke chapter 23 verses 27 through 31. A large number of people followed him, including women who mourned and wailed for him. Jesus turned and said to them, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. For the time will come when you will say, 'Blessed are the barren women, the wombs that never bore, and the breast that never nursed.' Then they will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if men do these things when the tree was green, what will happen when it is dry?" The crucifixion of Jesus. It is sometime before noon when the procession reaches the outskirts of Jerusalem, and a crowd gathers on a craggy little hill which is known as Golgotha. This is the skull. As Jesus is nailed to the wooden cross and lifted up, the scene below him becomes a strange mixture of emotions. On one hand, he sees the bitter sorrow of his family and followers, and on the other hand, he sees the carnival-like atmosphere of the soldiers and those who have demanded his death. As he awaits his death with increasing pain and agony, Jesus speaks briefly with one of the two robbers crucified with him. Then, seeing his mother, Mary, he directs John to care for her. By early afternoon, the end is near. As unusual darkness covers the land, Jesus cries out his last words and gives up his spirit in death. The significance of the hour is marked by a series of miraculous events which fill the people with awe. Jesus is crucified. Matthew chapter 27, verses 33, 34, and 38. Mark chapter 15, verse 23, 25, 27, and 28. Luke chapter 23, verses 32 through 34a. John chapter 19, verse 18. 9 a.m., noon. Two other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. They came to the place called the Skull. There they crucified him, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. It was the third hour when they crucified him.